Good morning. We're here to talk about Silicon Valley real estate market and then the Greater Bay Area. We're going to start off in 20 micro market areas in Silicon Valley, and then we'll compare the three counties, Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, and Alameda County, and then we'll move on to the Greater Bay Area. I'm Richard Calhoun with Creekside Realty, real estate broker here in Silicon Valley for 40 plus years. These are the slides that we're going to be going over. There's some significant differences between the data you'll be seeing today and what most people report. For example, I do 5-week moving periods instead of calendar months. There's a lot of reasons for that. I also look at offers accepted during the past 5 weeks versus the pending transactions that most people focus on. Reason for that, I want to give equal weight to all transactions. I also look at the list price reductions that sellers are taking, which is something I've never heard of anybody else doing. So here's the first slide we're looking at. It gives you a recap of all the things we're going to go over. We're going to be looking at the active inventory. Not only are we going to look at the active inventory levels now, we're going to compare that to the 10-year normal, so you get some idea. The same with the number of offers. How many offers are there currently versus what's that compared to the normal? And lastly, the DUI now compared to DUI compared to the 10-year normal. Then we talk about days on market. This makes more sense. This is how long the 75th percentile takes to sell their property in each of the different micro market areas. This is the magnitude of price reductions. This is a very small number, but still a number that gives you an idea. For example, if on average the sellers are getting 0.3% above their asking price, you know that's a strong market. If they're taking a 2.6% reduction, that's a pretty weak market. Now, 2.6% may not sound like much, but that's because the vast majority take no price reduction whatsoever. For example, in this area, the expensive areas, which is one of the areas hardest hit currently, less than 20% of all of the sellers take any price reduction. That means that 80% of the sellers are taking no price reduction. So of the sellers that are taking the price reduction, there's a multiplying factor of 5. This 2.5 roughly price drop turns into being something like a 12.5% price drop on average for the people that are actually taking the price reduction. Then we get into the overbids, the magnitude. This is flipping over to looking at what the buyers are doing, and then the frequency of the buyers overbidding on their offers. The amount of appreciation since the last 9 months of 2015, that period was picked because the prices were fairly stable. Then the price, not just the median, which is what the colors assigned by, which is the middle number, but also the 10 percentile and the 90 percentile. So you know that 80% of the homes that sell in that micro market area sell between those prices. And then a rough estimate of what the payments are for those payments given the current interest rates. Also, when you're looking on this on YouTube, I have an index to let you jump to your favorite part of the presentation. And if you have a favorite part that's not indexed, please let me know what that is and I will index it for you. Now we're looking at the active listings compared to the 10-year norm. If you have a low number of listings, that favors the seller in a hot marketplace. And that's why when these numbers are below 100%, you have the red color. And so fairly quickly you can see it. Now I will point out for the first 3 slides, I think it is, Alameda County is gray because I don't have the same level of data, but I have data that I approximated it already once. I need to find that data again to approximate it to come up with this data because this is a relatively new data slide. Basically, you can see as you travel south and east, you get hotter. Also, the North San Mateo County hotter, which means they have a lack of inventory. Now you look at offers, and this is interesting. We also have a lack of offers. We're only selling roughly 2/3 the number of offers that we would expect to be selling at this time of the year. There's clearly a lack of offers. And then we look at DUI. This is the balance between the two. Since you have a lack of inventory and a lack of buyers, where do the two balance out? And you can see that in sort of the affordable areas of Santa Clara County, you basically have a DUI that's below normal. In fact, all the areas for the most part, except for the expensive areas, which is basically San Mateo County, are below normal. A lower DUI is a faster paced marketplace. It takes less time to sell all of your inventory. Now you're looking at the raw counts of days on unsold inventory, and basically between 40 and 80 I consider to be a balanced marketplace. Now, here between 42 and 78 is no color. That's why this 40.6 that I say verbally is a balanced marketplace has a very small shade of pink to it, is because it's below 42. But basically somewhere, and it varies a little bit from geographical area to geographical area, and also it works out well with 255 colors and hexadecimal. I fudged a little bit on my numbers, and that's why I go from 7 to 42. It's also the number of weeks. I thought that going from 1 week to 6 weeks made more sense than 40 days. because the real estate market is really based on a weekly cycle. Now you're looking at the 75th percentile on the marketplace. This makes a little bit more sense if you look at how long it takes all the sellers to sell their property, and you look at the 75th longest person out of 100 listings, the 75th percentile. These are the number of days. So in Santa Clara County, you're under 2 weeks. In Alameda County, you're roughly at the same, pretty much under 2 weeks. And San Mateo County is much closer to 3 weeks. And in most areas of the country, 3 weeks of selling the property, 75% of it in 3 weeks, people would say that's a fast marketplace. Around here, it's actually a little bit on the slow side, but I would still consider that to be a balanced marketplace, which is why it's still mostly white and a slight shade of pink. From 1 to 3 weeks is red. From more than 3 weeks to less than 7 weeks is neutral in color, and then above 7 weeks is blue in color. Now we're looking at the average price reductions, and this is price reductions that the seller takes before the offer comes in, or the asking price reductions. And you can see that some areas, basically Cupertino, Sunnyvale, and North San Mateo County, Fremont, Union City, Newark, Hayward, San Leandro, and San Lorenzo, as well as Berkeley and Alameda. So a good chunk of Alameda County is all above 100%, which it means sellers are actually putting their house on the market and then, based on activity, raising their price, or potentially right as the offer comes in, raising the price. I don't look at where the price was raised or lowered relative when the offer came in. But then you go up in San Mateo County and you can see there's a lot more blue balanced marketplaces where sellers are taking more than a 0.75% reduction. And again, this is a very tight criteria that you may normally not look at, and maybe that's why most people don't look at it. But the huge advantage of this is you don't have to wait for escrows to close to see what's happening to get the sale price. So you can look at the seller price, and as these numbers go up and down, you can tell the market accelerating or slowing. Just because it's a tight criteria doesn't mean you can't use it. This is the frequency of sellers reducing their asking price, and you can see that in Santa Clara County, the numbers are in the high single digits, just below 10. In Alameda County, the numbers actually getting below 5 in a lot of the areas. So Alameda County is outperforming Santa Clara County as far as fewer sellers reducing their price. And you can see the slightly paler color down here in Santa Clara County versus the deeper red up here in Alameda County. And then San Mateo County obviously is a much paler red because the more sellers there are taking their price reduction. And when I say more, it's basically varying. You either have 10% or you have 20% and a little fluctuation in between. So that's even not a large percentage of your marketplace. Then we look at the magnitude of overbidding. This is how much buyers are coming in and overbidding to try to ensure their offers are accepted. And you can see that Alameda County and Santa Clara County are pretty much the same shade of pink. San Mateo County is a lighter shade. In Alameda County, it is noteworthy that Alameda, the island, the city, and Berkeley, as well as Oakland, are deeper red. And you can see in Oakland, you have 12% overbid, and in Alameda and Berkeley, you have 17% overbid. Now you have the frequency of overbidding. How common is overbidding? A little less distinction between the different counties, but it's just basically the same pattern, especially the eastern southern portion of Santa Clara County, everything except for the northwest section, and Alameda County are basically the same color, pretty red, frankly. Somewhere around 3/4 to 80% of the sellers are getting overbid. If you go up into San Mateo County, the number's much closer to 50 to 60%. It's still a significant percentage, but it's clearly down. It's a lot easier to get 50, 60% of the offers, transactions to have an overbid than it is to get 75, 80% of those transactions to have an overbid. Here's the appreciation, and this is very interesting. It's almost inversely proportional to price, where you basically have your peninsula and west portion of Santa Clara County, sort of where the expensive homes or the more expensive homes are located. You're having the least amount of appreciation. The outlying areas are having the greater appreciation. I believe what we're seeing in the marketplace is very much still being driven by COVID. The desire to be close to the workplace is not as high as it used to be because people may only have to commute into work 3 times a week now instead of 5 times a week, so they're willing to commute in from further away. Therefore, there's less appreciation, typically because of compounding. Whoever's had the highest appreciation appreciation in the most recent years with the highest price has the highest overall appreciation, and that's basically what we're seeing. Now we're getting into price, and as I said before, you not only have the median in the middle, but you have the lowest 10 percentile and the highest 10 percentile, or the 90 percentile. So you know that 80% of the homes are between these two numbers, which there's only a little bit over, it's about $1.1 million. 80% are in that range. 40% of the homes are between 900,000 and $1.25 million, and 40% of the homes are between $1.25 and $2 million. So you have $750,000 range here, and you only have a $350,000 range here, and that's basically is the bell-shaped curve of the distribution of pricing of homes. And here is a recap that we went over at the beginning. It might make a little bit more sense, but you can pick one of your 20 micro market areas of Silicon Valley on the left and see what the micro market conditions are, or come over here and either pick the sale price or your price payment range and find out what micro market areas you could afford to buy in. Now we're looking at Silicon Valley as a whole. We're looking at the three components, which are the purple line, the number of active listings right now, and you can see that we have about 65% of the active listings that we'd expect. We're selling about 72% of the offers that we'd expect. So it's both are way below 100%, but the number of offers are higher than the number of active listings. And that gives you, when you do the ratio, a DUI that's going to be below where you'd expect it to be at 91%. We're actually having a faster paced marketplace on a very limited basis because of the limited number of inventory and the limited number of transactions. This is looking at the record low volume of sales, and it's, to me, this is something that most people aren't really talking about that I think is pretty significant. But if you look in the last 10 years, we're only selling 70% of the median of the last 10 years and 90% of our previous low. I think that's pretty significant. And if you go back over a 25-year period of time, again, we're at 92% because the minimum number happens to be in the last 10 years. And in fact, it was only last year. So we're selling 10% fewer homes than we did last year. So the volume is down fairly dramatically, but the speed of the marketplace is up. And then if you look at dark blue here is your record low, your light shaded blue is the second back. And basically we've been the worst out of the last 25 years and the worst out of the last 10 years, except for the period right around when COVID was shutting us down pretty hard. Now we're looking at the estimated payment for all of Silicon Valley. This is the cheapest 10 percentile home down here. The payments would be just about $6,800. The median priced home is about $12,000 a month, and the 90 percentile home is about $24,000 a month. But that assumes an 80% loan. A lot of people are putting more than 20% down, especially in the higher bracket. A lot of those people have made money in either the stock market or in a privately held startup firm. Now we're going to be looking at the ask price reductions. They're weekly distributions because I do the data every week, but they're a month apart, roughly 4 or 5 weeks apart. Now we're looking at the price reductions. These are distributions as of Friday going back for 5 weeks. I'm starting off roughly a month apart, and then 3 months back I jumped from 13 weeks, which is 3 months ago, to 12 weeks, and then do weekly ever since. The blue down arrow here indicates a declining marketplace. If it was a bright red up arrow, that would be an improving marketplace. If they're both bright, it's a plateau. The red is shaded just to show it because it doesn't apply for this slide because it's currently in a downward trend. So here we go. Major jump down. Now you jumped up for a week. And I'm also looking at most likely of doing away with the arrows and just letting you watch the line move up and down. So if anyone has strong indication that they want the arrows kept, please reach out to me through YouTube or directly. Otherwise, I'll probably delete them for next week. That is time consuming, and I'm not sure it adds that much, and it's sometimes not accurate because I'm in such a press for time to get the video out. Now we're doing is flipping over and looking at the buyers, and it's the same concept: weekly, monthly, and then weekly increments. So major down, 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 plateau. Now major up, plateau, and now it's going up and plateauing, up and plateauing. And remember, this data, because it requires sale prices, what lags behind by the length of escrow, are about 5 weeks. Now we're going to focus on Silicon Valley. We're going to, as a whole, instead of looking at all the micro market areas. And so what you're looking at here now is the purple line is your data. The red line is the 10 percentile that would be a hot marketplace. The gray line is the median, what you'd expect based on the past 10 years. And the blue line is the 10 percentile or a 90 percentile, indicating a cool marketplace. Typically, we'd expect to have about 2,800 listings. And in fact, we only have 1,757. The least you'd expect, the 10 percentile, is 1,744. So we're very close, but slightly above the 10 percentile. So we're basically having one of the hottest years you'd expect to have. And clearly, the 10 percentile isn't the record low. I didn't want to do the extremes. I felt it was more important to compare it to, a lot of statisticians look at quadrants, and in real estate that says that 50% of the activity is happening between this, and I find consumers want to know what's happening to the other 50% of the market. Sort of doing a outlying quadrant and doing the 10 and 90 percentile, I can say that 80% of the activity happens between these two data points, and that's a lot more meaningful to the consumer, at least based on my interactions to date. Now we're doing the same thing with the number of offers, and you can see the current number of offers are actually below the 10-year where you'd expect it to be. You'd expect to have at least 2,260 offers accepted, and we only have 22,060 offers accepted. So we're short by about 10%. We're short compared to the median, which is up here at almost 2,900. So you're short by about 700, or about 25% of the marketplace. Sort of our best year you'd expect is up here around 3,133. And we're almost a third off of that number, not quite. Maybe 30% would be closer estimate. Here's the days on sold inventory. This is much more important between the two, because you can have low activity and low offers, low active listings, low number of offers accepted, and still have a balanced marketplace. So in this particular case, that's sort of what we have, is low inventory, low number of offers accepted, giving us a balanced marketplace that's pretty hot. I mean, your days on sold inventory is at 30. The hottest you'd expect it to be is 29. The median is 34, and the coolest you'd expect is 43. We're not right on the record high, but we're close to the record speed DUI, which is a record low for DUI, than a record high, which would strongly favor the seller and be rough on the buyers. This is DUI versus typical. You can see last year we were spending a lot of time with a slower marketplace than typical. Earlier this year, here's the beginning of second quarter, halfway through first quarter, we went from a slightly slower marketplace than you'd expect to a faster marketplace. Here's looking at the time on marketplace. This is easier for a lot of people to understand. What's the 75th percentile seller taking to sell? The fastest would be 14 days. Right now we're at 15, median is 17. So you can see it's pretty tight market. The slowest you'd expect is 24, a little over 3 weeks. So we're just basically a day over 2 weeks. Here's again, looking at the typical. So last year you can see we were taking longer, and even earlier this year we were taking longer, but basically starting at the end of first quarter, beginning of second quarter this year, the market was improving rapidly, and now we're sort of at the 91 percentile. Sellers are selling their properties in 90% of the time you'd expect them to sell their property in. Here's looking at average ask price reductions. When the market's cold, we're only taking 1.1% price reduction. Right now, we're taking 0.6%. And this is blurry at 99.4 because there's two numbers. There's the purple line and the black line, and they're essentially on top of one another. And then the least price reductions you'd expect is 0.3% reduction. So you can see that the range is basically 0.8%, which is a pretty tight criteria, but I still think it's pretty useful. Why do I think it's useful? You come back here to 2022 that most people can remember, and it indicates that the market started to slow down around Valentine's Day, which is about when the market really did start to slow down when you really look at the data, even though the perception for most people was probably about May. By May, it was already down here. You went from above the hottest marketplace you'd expect, which would be the least price reductions, to basically at the median and continuing to fall off a cliff, where fairly quickly by July 1st, we were taking more price reductions than you would expect. And we had our record low year last year. And now we're turning around and coming back up and basically right about the median where you'd expect it to be. And here's the graph showing compared to typical. So you can see very clearly, even though it was rising rapidly in starting middle of February of 2022, You can see it raised rapidly to July 1st, and then it would basically hit a plateau. And then basically by April 1st, it's falling off a cliff again, not as steep as the cliff back here. And this is an improving cliff where this was a declining cliff. This is the frequency of sellers reducing their price, how common it is. The least you'd expect is 8.5%. Right now we're at 11%. The typical is 12.4. So we're pretty close to a typical marketplace, and the most you'd expect is 17% of the sellers to reduce their asking price. That's why it's such a tight criteria, where 80% of the people don't participate in this reduction of their asking price. And that's a testament to how much research sellers do when they put their house on the market. They don't have to do price adjustments. This is the frequency compared to the norm. And again, you can see the frequency of price reductions started shooting up right in the middle of February, started shooting up, and then it stayed high all the second half of 2022 and the first quarter of 2023. But even here, this is probably about March 1st, it started to fall off a cliff, which is a good improving marketplace. Here's your average overbid. Right now, you can see this is flipping over and looking at the buyers. The typical buyer right now, well, not the typical, the average buyer is coming in 6.5% over, very close to what you'd expect at this time of the year at 6.8%. I basically call that a match. The lowest you'd expect it to be is 4%. The most you'd expect it to be is 12, almost 13%. You can see that in the heat of the marketplace in 2022, we were up about 18.5% over. And you might say, well, why is this, showing April 1st when you said the market changed in middle of February? Remember that this data is reflecting market conditions that happened 5 weeks earlier. That's the whole reason why I think looking at the list price reductions is more valuable, is if you're following just what's happening to the sale price, you're losing that 5 weeks. And that 5 weeks is basically the middle of February to something approaching March 1st. Now, clearly that's at least one, if not two extra weeks, but that's just each data point changes slightly differently. So that's why I think looking at what's happening with list price is so important. This is the frequency of overbidding. And right now you can see 70% of the buyers are overbidding on a property. We started off looking at the micro markets within Silicon Valley. Now we're looking at all of Silicon Valley. And then we go back and look at the individual counties. Here's the appreciation over time. The straight line sort of shows the rate of appreciation. We're just shy of 1.6 million. You can see that's down from our peak, which was about 1.74. So we're, $140,000 off, not 10% any longer. Maybe I can't do the math real fast in my head. Maybe about 6%. 6% would be 642. Yeah, just about 6%, maybe a little bit more than 6%. And this is looking at the counties that I was alluding to. So now the blue is going to be Santa Clara County, the burnt orange is San Mateo County, and the gray is Alameda County. And that will be the true for the next several slides. And one of the things that jumps out to me right off the bat is San Mateo County is at 450, which is just about where it is typically at this year. So one county out of three has right about the number of listings you'd expect it to be, but it is the smallest county. But now look at Alameda County and Santa Clara County. They're both right around 650 active listings. I mean, you'd expect Santa Clara County to be somewhere around maybe 1,350, and you'd expect Alameda County to be somewhere around 1,500. They have less than half the inventory you'd expect them to have. Here's the same concept with the number of offers accepted. Here you can see that San Mateo County is only at 400 offers accepted, and the level you'd expect is maybe 550. So the offers in San Mateo County are down, which is why when you look at DUI for San Mateo County, it's above where you'd expect it to be. And then Santa Clara and Alameda County are both down, 800 and 850, and they're down from some numbers, it's hard to pick a number, but maybe 1175, something like that. So those two counties are normally right on top of one another. I would say that Santa Clara County is doing a little bit better than Alameda County as far as the number of offers accepted, but Alameda County is outperforming Santa Clara County as far as the magnitude of overbidding. Here's looking at days of unsold inventory for the three, so you can really see that San Mateo County is slower at just shy of 40 days, followed by Alameda County at 30 days, and Santa Clara County being the fastest at 26 days. Again, Santa Clara County has the fastest marketplace, but not the most robust as far as volume. compared to normal. Here's the time on the market. Alameda County and Santa Clara County are identical at 16 days on the market for the 75th percentile seller, and San Mateo County is 5 days longer at 21. 5 days may not sound a lot, but when you're talking about 16 to 21, that's 1/3 of the 16. So it's a third longer to sell in San Mateo County currently. This is the magnitude of price reductions. You can see San Mateo County is doing the largest price reductions, followed by Santa Clara, and Alameda County is doing the most. They're all less than 1%, but again, this is a criteria that doesn't move around very much, but is still very valuable in looking in shifts of the marketplace. Frequency of price reductions, Alameda County at 9%, Santa Clara just shy of 11, and San Mateo County at, that's actually last week's data at 15.4. The current data is going to be about 14.8 or something like that. Now we're looking at the overbid magnitude on average. So this is where you put everybody in a blender, including those that go under. And the least do well is San Mateo County at 3.7% above asking price, followed by Santa Clara County at 5.3%. And doing the best is Alameda County at 9%, almost doubling Santa Clara County and almost tripling San Mateo County's overbid. This is the frequency. Alameda County obviously is on the top. Then you have Santa Clara County at 70% and San Mateo County at only 60%. And I say only 60% because a lot of times, just the way the huge shortage of inventory, it's not uncommon, no matter what kind of marketplace we're in, for at least 20%. And typically when you just look at this graph, you can see 50% or more of the offers are over asking price the bulk of the time. The only time it was below that was in the huge slowdown that we experienced in 2022. And there it was between 50 and 30%, still probably more overbidding than most people realize. This is the appreciation. The big takeaway here is Santa Clara County. You can see all three counties were on top of one another. Santa Clara County is now really pulled away, followed by Alameda County, and San Mateo is doing the least well. And if you come back here and use a little bit of imagination, they're all on top of one another. And San Mateo County was even on top of there coming out of the pandemic a little bit. But by the beginning of the fourth quarter in 2020, the San Mateo County sort of started being on the low end and stayed on the low end. And that's all the fact that it's less need to be close to work is less important, and people aren't willing to pay the premium any longer, or they're not willing to pay as much of a premium. Here's your price appreciation, and it gives you an idea of where you're back to. If we start up here in San Mateo County, they're basically a little bit above where they were in 2021. Santa Clara County is way above 2021, and Alameda County is below where they were in 2021. But I think Alameda County did the biggest run up here with the pandemic, coming out of the beginning part of the year when people were willing to go further to buy properties. Alameda County went up the greatest amount. And here's the same information on regular paper. The previous one was on log paper. Here's looking at an estimate of the monthly payments. I believe all except for this 9.7 is current week status. I'll have to pay a little bit more attention. The current monthly payment for Alameda County is going to be closer to 10,000. Santa Clara County is 13.5 and 14.75 of $14,750 roughly in San Mateo County. That's assuming jumbo money rates using the average for the country only because it's an easily available number on the internet. Finding local rates is not as a consistent source of equal funding rates that represents what buyers are doing is harder to find because banks become competitive and less competitive depending on whether they're coming in or out of the marketplace. This is the table of the actual numbers. The number of new listings this week is basically unchanged. Yet there's always going to be some fluctuation. The active listing count did not get updated. I'm sorry about that. This is last week's active listings. I don't have this week's current active listings in there. I didn't catch that. The offers did get updated, so you can see that there's some that are higher and some that are lower. Santa Clara County is down 2%. Alameda County is up 2%, and San Mateo County is down 1%. When you do the weighted average of them, you come up with where the offers are down 0.3%. We may be down a little bit next week because of the 3-day weekend this weekend. Days of unsold inventory basically unchanged. To me, the trigger point is about 5 days in a week. Here you can see we changed 1/10 of one day. We basically slowed down across the board in Santa Clara and San Mateo County. Alameda County improved by 7/10 of a day, so it had the biggest improvements and the biggest shift. Well, I guess the difference between 6/10 and 7/10 is pretty insignificant. So Santa Clara County slowed the same amount of count that Alameda County sped up, and they're roughly the same size. So San Mateo County was the reason we went up 1/10 of a percent, and it's only 1/10 because San Mateo County is a much smaller number. And then here's the closing. You can pick what number you want to look at. Now we're shifting out of Silicon Valley that we've been focused on, and we're going into what I call the Greater Bay Area, which includes San Francisco Marin, the North Bay, Sonoma, Napa, Solano, Contra Costa, Central Valley, San Joaquin, and Sacramento, and the Central Coast, Santa Cruz, and Monterey. Starting off with the numbers that should be basically the same metric. You can come back and look at the number that you find the most valuable for you. The real takeaway, in my opinion, here is looking at Central Valley and North Bay. They're up here some number. If you say we're July the 1st, they basically have 5,000 listings. And now they're down here at 1,900 and 1,500. That's a huge reduction. We think the Santa Clara County at 1,700 being shy, maybe the average number is somewhere around 3,300 for Santa Clara County. So Santa Clara County is about 50%, but these counties are about less than 1/3 of 1%. They're about 30%, because if you take 30% of 5,000, that's 1,500, and that's roughly the numbers you are, especially for the Central Valley. So the Central Valley has the greatest shortage of inventory, and that maybe help explain why they have the greatest appreciation, and also it's directly related to COVID. If people can now commute in from the Central Valley 2 or 3 days a week instead of they're willing to move out to the Central Valley to buy a bigger house or a larger lot or whatever it is that drives them, and then commute in. And then you can see that the least changed is San Francisco at Marin. It's coming in with inventory at 600. And if you come out here and say it's, typically around just shy of 1,000, it may be like a 55-60% reduction. Santa Cruz, the Central Coast, is a little bit more with the blue. This is the number of offers accepted, and all the offers are down. As you can see, the offers for San Francisco and Marin are probably doing the best at 500. If I was to look at that, I'd almost pick 500 as their average. So San Francisco is basically having the same number of transactions that they normally do. Here's the days on market, and you can see historically, Silicon Valley is way below all the others. And right now, it's basically on top of Central Valley. So Central Valley is the yellow up here. It's normally up in the pack, and now it's basically tied for the best. And that's all the fact that their inventory has gone down the most. And then you have the North Bay the next. Then you have San Francisco Marin, and the one that's doing the slowest is the Central Coast. But if you look back, the Central Coast is always on the top. And that's why I was saying earlier that each micro market area has sort of its own speed. And typically Santa Cruz, instead of being the 40 to 80 that I batter around for Silicon Valley, is probably closer to something like 50 to 100 for a balanced marketplace. Here's the Greater Bay Area time on the marketplace. You can see Silicon Valley is still the fastest at 15, followed by the Central Valley at 20. Everybody else is pretty close right here at 30. Typical overbid, Santa Cruz, Central Coast is the least amount of overbidding at only 0.3%. Central Valley, even though it's hot, is only having 1% overbidding, 1.5% overbidding. So it basically says people that are going out there for affordability aren't going crazy with the amount they're overbidding. If they're willing to drive to make it more affordable, they don't want to pay more than they have to ensure getting the house. Where here in Silicon Valley, some people claim we're paying with funny money. So people that really want a house will throw an extra 20% just to try to ensure that they get the property. North Bay is next, and then following up the pack is Silicon Valley and San Francisco Marin with the highest overbidding, which fits into that stereotype of Silicon Valley and the city being where all the high tech and startup companies happen. So those people that have made it in the startup world come out now, and they're willing to throw some of their profits that they earned from their hard work and the risk they took into making sure they get the house by overbidding by 6.5%. This is the frequency of overbidding. Now Silicon Valley pulls away at a 71%, because even San Francisco and Marin, even though the average overbid was the same, the frequency of overbidding is 10% lower at 60%, which would actually suggest that the people that are overbidding in San Francisco and Marin are overbidding by a larger dollar amount because they're a smaller fraction. And when you put them all in a blender, that would give you a lower number unless the magnitude of overbidding of those that are overbidding is higher. And that's why, there's a limitation on the different ways I slice the data, but you can get some of it by what we have. The North Bay at 58%, the Central Valley at 55%. So right up there in the contention with most of them. And the least amount of overbidding is the Central Coast at only 45% of the buyers overbidding on a property when they make an offer. Frequency of sellers' price reductions. This sort of seems like it's out of order time-wise, so I'll put it back where it should belong. But the lowest is the Central Coast at basically 11%. The others are right together to the point where you can't read the numbers. I think I'm reading 16.1, 16. It looks like 6, but I can't tell what the other number, and it's 17.5. But if you call them right on top of one another, it's something like 16.5. You're not going to be far off the mark. This is the average sale price to list price ratio. So the biggest amount of overbidding is again in Silicon Valley, followed by San Francisco and Marin. Then the other three are pretty much together, all at 101% or less. Central Coast is right at 100%, and then you have the Central Valley and the North Bay almost on top of one another at 1% overbids. This is the appreciation. The big takeaway here is look at San Francisco and Marin. We were talking about San Mateo County falling out compared in Silicon Valley, but here the region is falling out because again, you go back before the pandemic and everybody's sort of bunched in together. You can see Silicon Valley had a standout 2 years, but San Francisco, Marin has done very poorly after the pandemic, and it's people aren't willing to pay that huge premium to live in the cities anymore. And look up on the top here, Central Valley has the highest appreciation. That commute isn't as a big a negative as it used to be, so people are going out and prices are appreciating. This is the total payments going back, and they're rough estimates, but there's some interesting takeaways. San Francisco Marin, the payments are roughly the same as they were at the peak of the marketplace. Here in Silicon Valley, the payments are significantly higher. This number here might be 11,000 and now it's 12,000. You're paying 10% more on a monthly basis for your house in Silicon Valley. It's also higher in the Central Coast. You have nice areas like Monterey Peninsula, Carmel Valley, but not as much of an increase probably as Silicon Valley. But you went from something like what do we want to call it, 7,800 up to 8,500. So the increase of about $700, almost 10% increase in the payment. North Bay is an increase, but not as much. And go Central Valley, and there's very little increase in payment. Some increase, but you went from some number, call it 3,900 to 4,200, only $300 increase in payment. And with that, I'm open for any questions. As I explained, the green URL is my root URL. That gets you to the archives on YouTube. If you add in the 2023, the year, you get to the live presentation Saturday morning. If you put in H for handout, the year, month, date code, which is H 2023-06-17, the handouts there, and I'm going to pat myself on the back. I got it out about 8:15 this morning. And then if you want a specific episode, let's see if I have any questions out there. I'm not seeing anybody with a question. I'll wrap up the meeting and see you next week. Thanks. Bye for now.